My name is Evelyn Hart, and on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, the day I walked down the aisle in a white dress, my parents' seats were empty. No apology, no congratulatory message. I stood in the sunlit garden, hearing applause from friends and my husband's relatives, and felt as if someone had quietly pushed me out of the very family that raised me. When I checked my phone, I saw a message my mother had accidentally sent to our family group chat. It read, "We're not participating in that circus. Celeste deserves better." If it were you, would you stay silent? Or would you do what I'm about to tell you next? Leave your thoughts in the comments, and if this story touches something deeper in you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow me through the journey of exposing a family built on image, not love. I grew up in a house where every wall told a story, but none of them ever told mine. Above the fireplace in the living room hung a grand portrait of Celeste in her first ball gown, the studio lights reflecting off her flawless skin, her confident smile as if the world had already decided she was born to shine. Right next to it was a photo of little Celeste wearing the teen pageant crown of Franklin County, followed by her gold-framed high school honors diploma hanging dead center on the wall. Below that was a photo taken at the headquarters of the luxury fashion brand where she works, a frame replaced last year, for Celeste's 29th birthday. And my photos? There weren't any. It wasn't that I hadn't tried. I once sent my mom a photo from my college graduation, me in a black gown, smiling wide as I received my degree in computer science. She replied with a short message, "Congrats, Celeste's going to be on a magazine cover this month." And that was that. I'd never blamed Celeste for being the perfect child. She was born that way. Tall, thick, glossy hair, sharp gray-blue eyes that could cut through anyone without needing to speak. She was the class little star, even in preschool. I was quieter. I liked reading, taking apart computers, and discovered early on that data encryption was far more exciting than beauty contests. But in my house, those interests weren't considered something to be proud of. I still remember when I was 12, after gaining a few pounds over summer break while finishing my first homemade game, my mom pulled me into the dining room, pointed at my half-eaten plate of pasta in front of Dad and Celeste, and said bluntly, "You can't keep living like this. Look at Celeste. You should learn from her." The following week, she signed me up for morning aerobics and started a body cleanse meal plan for the whole family, which really meant just me. Celeste still got to eat cake every night. My dad didn't say much. He was kind, but in a way so silent I was never sure if he truly saw me. One time, I brought home a statewide coding award for high school girls, the first girl from my school to make it into the top 3. I left the certificate on the kitchen table. Dad looked up from his newspaper and said, "Oh, your mom's reviewing Celeste's college applications. Don't bother her right now." So I folded the certificate and quietly tucked it into my drawer. It's still there today. The paper has turned yellow. But the hardest part wasn't being ignored. It was the way I found myself automatically shrinking, as if I had already accepted being a side character in my own story. I started avoiding family photos. At every gathering, I sat at the end of the table, listening to them talk about Celeste, her new job, new contract, new boyfriend. I once had a 3-year relationship in college, the first man who ever loved me sincerely. When I told Mom about him, she asked, "Is he good looking? Will he help you improve the gene pool a little?" I thought I misheard, but no. My mother always had a way of making the harshest things sound like gentle suggestions. "You know I love you, but you have to understand, Celeste's under pressure to maintain the family image. You could help her by keeping yourself a bit more presentable, more blended in. Don't always talk about those, what are they, programming games." I wanted to tell her, "I don't make games, I write voice recognition algorithms." But I didn't say anything. I smiled. The kind of smile girls like me learn early. Small, quick, and meant to swallow everything else. Celeste never directly belittled me. She wasn't that type. She used subtle glances, seemingly harmless compliments. You're so smart. I'd go crazy if I studied engineering, but don't you think female engineers are usually kind of stiff? Like, tech girls kind of all dress the same, huh? Thin sweaters, tidy ponytails. Not like, people like me. Then she'd smile. So gentle, but cold to the bone. I used to think I was used to it, but when I found myself at the center of my own wedding, surrounded by flowers, beside a man who loved me without conditions, I realized there are wounds that may look healed on the surface, but have never been bandaged properly inside. And that day, when I realized my parents didn't forget to come, they chose not to. I knew. I couldn't keep shrugging, smiling, and swallowing anymore. I met Caleb at a tech conference in Austin that fall. He didn't look like anyone else in that room full of name tags and heads buried in slide decks. While everyone else debated the newest open-source platform or system performance, he asked me one question that made me laugh. If you had to reprogram your life from scratch, what line of code would you keep? I answered without hesitation. The ability to be quiet in a crowd and still feel worthy. That's a line the world needs to run more often. We started talking from there. Not flirty small talk. It was a quiet kind of connection, just enough to make me want to stay by the coffee table a little longer during each break. When the conference ended, Caleb walked over and handed me a sticky note. There was no phone number, just one short line. If one day you want to sit in a room and still feel seen, call me. I kept that note in my wallet for 2 weeks before I texted him. And then 4 years passed. Caleb wasn't flashy like the men Celeste used to date. The marketing guy from New York, the part-time model, the young CEO. But he had a calmness that made me feel safe. He never compared me to anyone. Never told me I was different from other girls like it was some kind of compliment. He simply saw me, chose me, and stayed, with the kind of patience that never felt like a test. There was no extravagant proposal. No fireworks, no fancy restaurant, no photographer hiding in the bushes. Just one October evening, I got home from work, tossed my laptop bag on the couch, took off my glasses, and said, I want waffles and to rewatch an old movie. He stepped out from the kitchen, placed a plate of warm waffles in front of me, and whispered, And if you want to live like this for the rest of your life, then marry me. I sat still for a few seconds, not from shock, but because my heart felt quietly, completely at peace. I called home to share the news the following weekend. Mom picked up. Her voice was stiff as always, though she tried to sound gentle. That's kind of sudden, isn't it? Are you sure? You don't need more time. I smiled. We've been together 4 years, Mom. I think that's long enough. She paused. I waited. For a congratulations, a bit of excitement, a question about the wedding date. But what I got was, you're not planning to wait for Celeste? She's been planning her wedding for a while, still hasn't set a date. If you go first, it might throw everything off. I gripped the phone so tight my fingers went numb. You're saying I'm getting married too soon, because my sister hasn't yet? Mom replied lightly, as if it made perfect sense. It's just, it would be easier for everyone if your sister went first. She's the youngest, she's been preparing for this a long time, and you know how Celeste is, she always has everything mapped out. Don't take it the wrong way. I'm happy for you. But what's the harm in postponing it a little? A trace of a smirk touched my lips. Sharp, deliberate. Not the kind of smile they taught me growing up. I can't wait for someone else to finish their story so I can start living mine, Mom. Mom sighed on the phone. I imagined her looking toward the staircase, where a framed photo of Celeste in a white sample gown hung, even though there'd never been an actual engagement. Well, I'll ask your father. But don't get your hopes up. Everyone's busy right now. In that moment, I knew, though no one said it aloud, that my mother wouldn't be coming. Not because she was too busy, but because she didn't want this event to happen in an order she couldn't control. A week later, I received an email from Celeste. Heard you're getting married. Congrats. Hope you find a dress that fits. White's not really your color, though. I looked at the screen, then hit archive without replying. I've never been the standout child. But I don't need permission to live the life I want. And if that makes someone uncomfortable, then maybe that's not my fault. I still remember the moment I stepped out of the little room behind the garden where I got dressed. The ivory alien gown that Caleb's mom and I had carefully chosen at a small boutique in Boulder swayed gently in the breeze. In my hand was a bouquet of cream dahlias with a few sprigs of pale lavender, picked that very morning from Aunt Miriam's garden. The music started. Caleb waited at the front, eyes shining. Friends, co-workers, people I had worked with over the years, they were all there. Even distant cousins I never expected showed up. They RSVP'd early and wrote, "Can't wait to witness your special day." Except my parents. The front right row, the one I had reserved with a nameplate engraved Lorraine and Douglas Hart, remained empty. I had saved that spot, naively hoping until the very last moment. Every time the side gate creaked, I turned to look. Every time the MC picked up the mic to make an announcement, I squeezed the bouquet tighter. But then the music shifted to the main procession. I knew they weren't coming. It didn't feel like disappointment. It felt like someone had taken a long needle and pierced a spot that had gone numb, to remind me that, yes, I could still hurt. After the ceremony, while guests enjoyed wedding cake beneath the ginkgo trees out back, Caleb sat beside me, his hand gently brushing my shoulder. "If you need to step away for a few minutes, I'll tell everyone you just need a breather. Don't push yourself." A few guests seemed puzzled by the obvious absence, but no one mentioned it directly. Aunt Miriam was the only one who gently asked when I passed her table. "They still haven't come?" I shook my head. She gave a small nod, her eyes looking at me with something I couldn't quite name. Maybe it was the kind of pain elders feel when they see wounds in the young that they can't heal. "We still did beautifully. Today, you are the most radiant bride I've ever seen." I gripped her hand, wanting to hold on to those words like a patch over the torn part of my heart. After a short honeymoon in Santa Fe, I decided to call my mom. I needed a clear answer. How much of this I had misunderstood. The phone rang for a while. When she finally picked up, her voice was flat. "Rebecca?" I paused. The last time she called me by the wrong name was in high school. "It's Evelyn," I corrected, gently but firmly. "Oh, right," she chuckled. "I'm cooking dinner. What's up?" "Mom, I wanted to ask something. The wedding invitations, both the paper one and the email version, did you get them?" There was a short pause. Then she answered, without hesitation. "No. You must have sent them to the wrong place. We haven't changed our address." I opened my laptop and clicked into the RSVP tracking on our wedding website. The status showed, read 2:17 p.m/April 4th /IP address Denver, CO. I have confirmation the email was opened, April 4th, from our home IP address. Nonsense. The system must have glitched. We didn't get anything. I bit my lip. And the paper one? I sent it via insured delivery. With a tracking number, the courier confirmed it was handed directly to someone named Lorraine Hart on April 16th. Then she laughed, but it sounded off, like a sound added in post-production. "Oh goodness, that must have been some kind of mix-up. I didn't get anything, Evelyn." In that moment, I knew I was speaking to someone who didn't want to remember, or was choosing to forget. I opened my drawer and took out the one invitation I'd kept for myself, the special edition with lace edges and embossed lettering. I ran my finger over the line. "You are cordially invited to witness the marriage of Evelyn Hart and Caleb Monroe." I invited them, fully, kindly, properly, gently. and they declined. And maybe they didn't forget. Maybe they never intended to come. I called my mother again on Saturday afternoon when I knew both she and my father would be home. I didn't schedule it in advance. I didn't need another conversation rehearsed with preloaded excuses. She answered on the third ring, irritation in her voice. This again? Evelyn, I already told you, stop clinging to little things like invitations. It's not about the invitation, Mom. It's about everything. A pause. Then I heard the phone switch to speaker. Dad had entered the room. Mom spoke first. So what is it you want to say? Spell out who you're blaming? I'm not blaming anyone. But I won't stay silent anymore. Mom scoffed. Silent? Evelyn, you've made this a whole ordeal across the family. You've made people think we're the kind of parents who'd abandon their daughter on her wedding day. Don't you think you're being dramatic? Mom, they don't think that because of what I said. They think that because you didn't show up. Dad interjected, voice low, trying to keep the peace. All of this would have been fine if you hadn't made yourself the center of everything. Evelyn, you always tend to play the victim. Anytime things don't go your way, you fall back on nobody cares about me. Your mom tried. What more do you want? I let out a short, dry laugh. Dad, how much is enough? When I won a full-ride scholarship and no one came to my award ceremony? When Mom canceled my 16th birthday party because Celeste had a last-minute photo shoot? Or when I asked to borrow Celeste's dress for prom and Mom said, "You don't want people comparing, do you?" That was her trying. I kept going. I learned to shrink so I wouldn't be a burden. I believed that if I was quiet enough, well-behaved enough, I'd earn a place in this family. But the more I did that, the more you all stepped over my boundaries. Mom cut in, her voice sharp. And now you're dumping all of this on us over a wedding? Because you selfishly wanted to marry before Celeste? You're making up this whole toxic family narrative to explain your loneliness? No, Mom. I didn't want to marry first. I just wanted to marry the man I love, on my own timeline, without waiting for someone else to figure out theirs. And if that made you feel like I upstaged your golden child, that's your issue, not mine. You don't get it. You've always been overly sensitive. I tried to raise you strong, but you always chose to be soft. How long do you plan to play the victim? I clenched my hand, then let it go, calm and steady. I'm not playing anything, Mom. I'm being real. And that's what bothers you. I could hear Dad exhale sharply. Someone set a glass down, gently, but with tension. I'm not sorry for getting married. For being different from Celeste. For loving someone who doesn't come from money, doesn't do television, doesn't have a curated social media feed showing off a perfect life. I only apologize for spending so many years thinking I needed your approval to be enough. So, you've decided to cut us off? I'm not cutting anyone off. I'm just done pretending everything's fine. My mother snapped. Celeste is having her engagement party this fall. Don't tell me you're planning to ruin that too. No one can ruin something that only looks beautiful with a mask on. I ended the call. I stayed there in silence, letting the steady rhythm of my heartbeat remind me I was finally calm. No chaos, no shrinking. The call from Celeste came on a Monday afternoon. I had just finished a meeting with the engineering team and was about to make more coffee when my phone buzzed. Her name flashed across the screen along with an old photo. Celeste in a red dress, long wavy hair, smiling like she was in a perfume ad. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. Her voice came through, direct as ever. Did you seriously not think about the consequences? I froze. Sorry, what are you talking about? You got married, without telling me, without asking, without waiting. I told you clearly that the producers and I were finalizing the shooting schedule. So this was the real reason Celeste had gone silent all this time. Not because she was busy. Not because she was traveling abroad. But because I got married ahead of her timeline. I tried to keep my voice calm. You're angry because I didn't ask your permission to get married. Celeste laughed, full of mockery. Not permission, but at least some consideration. I signed a contract for a wedding show this fall. The entire crew built a storyline around the perfect youngest daughter of the Hart family preparing for a fairy tale wedding. Now, you've jumped in. Everything's messed up. I tightened my grip on the phone, unable to believe what I was hearing. Celeste, are you saying I ruined your TV show by marrying the man I love the way I chose? This isn't personal. You know how media works. They dig everything up. They'll find out you're my sister. Then they'll ask why you got married first. Why our family didn't attend. They'll turn your wedding into a shadow cast over mine. The quiet office pressed in around me as I tried to process her words. Her words cut through the thin fabric of hope I had held onto for years between us as sisters. So you care more about a TV contract than my actual wedding? Celeste paused for a few seconds, then answered, soft, but sharp. I care about the image of this family. An image you've always managed to mess up since we were kids. I laughed, not out of amusement, but because I was too exhausted to react any other way. I didn't realize living authentically would disrupt a scripted production. Celeste's tone tightened. Don't be sarcastic. I didn't call to fight. I called to let you know if this affects my career, I won't stay quiet. What are you going to do, ban me from the family tree? Erase me from the biography? Hire someone to rewrite the line on Wikipedia to say Celeste is an only child? You always have to make things dramatic. And you always turn everything into a stage. Her voice turned cold. Maybe you should have learned to stay quiet, like you used to, growing up. At least then things hadn't fallen apart yet. My chest tightened. Silence was never agreement, Celeste. I stayed quiet because I thought if I was humble enough, there'd be room for me in this family. But the quieter I became, the more invisible I was. I heard her breathing on the other end, then her final words. Fine. If you're choosing to stand against me, I won't hold back either. I closed my eyes, wishing this were just a scene from a badly written monologue. But it wasn't. It was real. My sister, the same girl who once held my hand as we ran through the backyard after breaking the shed window, now saw me as a threat. I went to Aunt Miriam's house on a gray afternoon, after the season's first rain. Not to vent, not to explain. I needed a quiet place where I didn't feel lost. She lived in a small wooden house on the outskirts of Boulder, where she and her late husband once planted a full lavender garden behind the yard, now overgrown but still gently fragrant in the breeze. I didn't need to knock. She always left the door slightly open whenever I told her I was coming. She was sitting by the window, mending an old sweater, her head tilted slightly like she was listening to something in the wind. I had barely set down my bag, hadn't said a word, when she spoke. There's something your grandmother left behind. I think it's time you had it. What is it? She didn't answer. She rose quietly and walked into the back room, where she kept everything related to Grandma, Marjorie, Hart. Less than a minute later, she returned with a small wooden box, worn with age, its metal latch slightly rusted. On the lid was a faded slip of paper, the handwriting shaky but clear. Evelyn, open. When you're strong enough to no longer need anyone's permission to know who you are. I stared at the words. My hands trembled as I touched the lid. Aunt Miriam said nothing more. She placed her hand gently on my shoulder, then stepped out onto the porch, leaving me alone in a room filled with the scent of damp wood and dried lavender. I opened the lid. Inside was a thick envelope tied with old velvet ribbon, a stack of yellowed birth documents, and a black and white photo. A young Marjorie standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. Wide eyes, messy hair. I opened the letter first. My grandmother's voice rose from every smudged line of ink. My dearest Evelyn, if you're holding this letter, it means you've reached the moment when you no longer need anyone to validate your existence. You deserve to know the truth, because you've lived with honesty. I paused. My heart thundered in my chest. You are not the biological daughter of Lorraine and Douglas. You came into this family at 8 months old, under unusual circumstances. Your birth mother was a young woman I once helped through an emergency shelter program for abused women. She had no family, was terrified during her pregnancy, but when her baby was born, she said only one thing: I want this child to live without having to hide. I knew Lorraine wasn't a gentle mother. I argued with her many times about how to raise you, but at the time, your grandfather had passed, and I was too old to keep you myself, so I let Lorraine and Douglas adopt you, on one condition. You would be told the truth when you were ready. I've kept this hidden too long, and maybe that was wrong. But I've always believed that one day you would find this, not out of curiosity, but because you deserve it. By the time I reached that part, the tears came. Not out of pain, but because everything that once felt blurry suddenly became clear. I turned to the birth certificate. The mother's name section had been blacked out with ink, but beneath it was the official stamp: temporary custody transferred to Marjorie Hart. At the bottom, a shaky signature from my birth mother. No name, no age, just a faint pencil-written line. You were the best thing I ever had. But I wasn't strong enough to keep you. I hugged the documents to my chest, eyes drifting toward the window where Aunt Miriam was watering her plants. Now I understood why I had always felt different. Not because I was less. Not because I was strange. But because I never belonged to the script they had written for the perfect Hart family. I stepped onto the porch, the wooden box still in my arms. Aunt Miriam handed me a cup of chamomile tea and sat down beside me. How long have you known? Since day one, she replied. But your grandmother insisted you be the one to decide when the truth mattered enough to be heard. I hosted that gathering on a late summer Sunday afternoon, when the sun had softened but the air was still warm enough for everyone to sit outside in the backyard. It wasn't a party. I didn't call it a reveal or a confrontation. I simply sent modest invitations to a few family members, the ones I had once trusted, the ones who had stayed silent for too long. On the invite, I wrote, "You're invited for tea, and to hear a story that perhaps you should have known long ago." Aunt Miriam was the first to arrive, carrying warm blueberry scones. Renee, my best friend, helped me set up the chairs, placing each wooden seat around the table, laying a white cloth, arranging the ceramic teacups I had saved since my wedding. Caleb quietly brought out a few extra chairs, then gently squeezed my hand. No matter what happens, you stood tall. I'm proud of you. My heart beat steadily, but my chest swirled. As guests arrived, Aunt Alice, Uncle Mark, Uncle Carl and his wife, even some cousins I'd once been close to, I welcomed each of them, poured their tea one by one, as if preparing a ceremony I didn't yet know how to end. It wasn't until near the end that Lorraine and Douglas showed up. They came with Celeste. My mother wore a pale gray dress, hair pinned high, lipstick darker than usual. My father stood silently, as always. Celeste wore oversized sunglasses and carried a dark leather bag, the kind she usually brought to court when representing media clients. No one made small talk. No one asked how I'd been. I waited for them to sit. Then I rose, holding a neatly bound folder. Thank you all for coming. I know I've long been the niece, the cousin, the daughter who seemed hard to understand. But today, I'm not here to be understood. I'm here to tell the truth. Every eye turned toward me, even as some faces stayed unreadable. I opened Grandma Marjorie's letter. I read every word she wrote, without skipping, about me being adopted, my birth mother's story, and her final note. If you are reading this, it means you are strong enough to know you were never a mistake. You are the continuation of someone who once wanted to protect what was right. I placed the letter on the table, then pulled out 3 more items. A copy of the wedding invitation postmarked as received, an email-read receipt from Lorraine's home IP address, a brief written statement from Renee, who had witnessed my mother open the invitation at my grandmother's house, then silently slip it into the kitchen drawer. I'm not sharing this to hurt anyone. I just can't keep being labeled as the dramatic one every time I'm in pain. Lorraine was the first to jump up. Her face turned pale, eyes wide with shock. But there was panic in them too. What kind of stunt is this? Are you trying to humiliate your mother in front of the whole family? You really want to disgrace this family just to make yourself look like the victim? Miriam didn't hesitate to speak, her voice steady but sharp. She doesn't need to humiliate anyone. She needs to stand still long enough for people to finally see. Celeste rose after our mother, quieter, but her eyes were still like blades. You've really gotten good at this. I didn't know when you learned to craft such a story. I didn't craft anything, you know that. Celeste clenched her purse strap, turned, and said nothing more. Lorraine followed. A moment later, Douglas lifted his eyes to meet mine, holding the look I once craved all through childhood, but no longer needed. Just 3 days later, the scandal broke. I wasn't the one who leaked it. I never said anything to anyone outside of close relatives, but in this world, the truth has a way of spreading when it's been hidden too long. The first call came from Renee. Did you see the entertainment news this morning? Before I could answer, she sent the link. The headline was bold, in red font. Reality star Celeste Hart accused of faking the perfect family image. Sister speaks out with evidence. I read every line, heart pounding. They quoted a close family source, someone within. They didn't name me, but the details were specific enough for anyone who knew us. Within hours, other outlets picked it up. Reports came that Celeste's filming contract had been terminated, as producers could no longer guarantee a positive image for a model marriage show. Soon after, I got a message from Aunt Alice. Your mother called me. She said you caused chaos to ruin your sister's career. I told her straight. Evelyn didn't need to fabricate anything. What happened to her over the last 30 years was enough. Next came a message from Uncle Mark. I didn't say anything that day because I didn't want to stir things up, but I've known for a long time. I never had the courage to speak. Now, I do. I'm proud you did what our whole generation couldn't. Tell the truth. Every message felt like a small light shining into corners I thought would stay dark forever. Aunt Miriam told me my mother had called nearly everyone in her contact list. In every call, she used the same familiar voice, half warm, half accusatory. We only wanted to protect the family's good image. Evelyn's too sensitive. She misunderstood everything. I don't know exactly what changed them. Maybe Grandma's letter, maybe the undeniable proof, or maybe their patience with the family mask simply wore out. An uncle I'd never been particularly close with, Uncle Robert, called on Saturday afternoon. His voice was low, direct. I want to say this. You don't need pity. You need recognition. And that day, when you read that letter, when you stayed calm despite everything said to you, I think you got it. I put him on speaker so Caleb could hear. He held my hand under the table, saying nothing, but I knew he understood. I'd waited my whole life to hear someone in the family say those words. Meanwhile, Celeste stayed completely silent. No posts on social media, no interviews. But a contact in PR told me she'd lost 3 major endorsement deals due to unstable image concerns. Over lunch that day with Renee and Aunt Miriam, I said, I didn't think anyone would take my side. I'm used to being the one people call too much. Aunt Miriam looked at me, her voice low but warm. Maybe they took their time, but in the end, the truth won. Not because it was loud, but because it was patient. Renee laughed and added, You know why people finally believed you? It wasn't the evidence. It was because for the first time, you didn't speak with tears. You didn't beg. You spoke to let go. I sat there between 2 women who shared no blood with me, yet I felt more at home than I ever did with anyone who called me daughter or sister. I lingered on the porch, one hand cradling a warm cup of tea, the other resting on an open wedding album. The day was fading. Late sunlight bathed the yard in gold, softening every photo in front of me as if life itself wanted to whisper something. The page I turned to showed me and Caleb laughing uncontrollably as a piece of wedding cake dropped during the photo shoot. My hair blown wild by the wind, my eyes shut tight from laughing too hard. Not perfect, but real. The next photo was me, linking arms with Aunt Miriam. Her hand trembled, but her smile was solid as stone. Beside her stood Renee, cheeks flushed, mid-sentence, saying something that had made me laugh out loud. I brushed my fingers over each of their faces, as if trying to hold on tighter to that moment, one where I didn't have to pretend, compete, or fight for space, in a family that only existed in name. I didn't see Lorraine or Douglas in those pictures. Celeste wasn't there either. And strangely, I didn't feel like anything was missing. I used to think that if I didn't get a blessing from my parents, every milestone in life would feel somehow incomplete. But sitting in the backyard, hearing Aunt Miriam tell stories of Grandma, listening to Renee's laugh, and hearing Caleb whisper, "I'm right here," I finally understood. Real love doesn't come from blood. It comes from choice. I poured more tea. A breeze flipped a few pages. The last photo was me, standing alone in a garden full of flowers, wedding dress flying, eyes looking toward the distance. The sunlight filtered through the leaves behind me, casting a beam of light that looked like I was stepping out of shadow, towards something brighter, with no one needing to lead the way. I sat down on the wooden chair by the porch and exhaled slowly. On the small table beside me sat Grandma's old letter, still right where I left it the first day I opened it. Every time I saw her handwriting, I could almost hear her voice. "If you're reading this, then you deserve the truth." There were no more framed family portraits on the wall inside this house. I'd taken them all down. In their place were wedding photos with Caleb, a picture of me and Renee hiking in Seattle, and one of me reading beside Aunt Miriam's lavender garden. I wasn't trying to build a new family. I was keeping only what was truly mine. One time, Caleb hugged me from behind while I was washing dishes and suddenly asked, "If you could go back to childhood, would you want to know the truth from the start?" I set the plate down, turned, and looked at him for a long time. No, I wouldn't want to know back then, when I still needed other people's permission to believe in myself. I looked up at the sky turning purple. The early fall breeze drifted under the porch roof, carrying the scent of lavender from the back garden. What would you do if one day you discovered you were never truly chosen, but were the only one in the whole family who lived honestly? I'm not telling this story to gain sympathy. I'm telling it because maybe someone out there is still living in silence the way I once did. And if someone is quietly suffering just to keep a family image from cracking, maybe it's time they heard this. The truth doesn't destroy, it frees. Have you ever felt like a stranger in the very place that was supposed to be home? Do you think sometimes walking away is what opens the door to living more truthfully? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your story. Because each of us has a corner that deserves to be seen through the lens of empathy. And if this story touched something deeper in you, don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next stories about family, choice, and the journey to reclaim what's truly ours.